Lately, a topic that has garnered much attention and discussion is the numerous bodies found in the river. Why have so many been appearing lately? I've spent a considerable part of my life on the river, so I've witnessed quite a few things, and I'd like to share some of them with you. For days now, the newspapers, locals, boatmen, and even the online community have been buzzing with news of a body found floating in the river. Then, a few more bodies appeared, and reports of people jumping into the river to end their lives kept coming. To me, none of this is strange or surprising. Such incidents happen all the time. Countless people die and drift down the river. We just don't know or pay attention. Usually, when floating bodies are found, both the villagers and the authorities consider them bad omens. They'd push them away, deeming them unlucky, sending them back and forth until they finally sank, swallowed forever by the cold river. Back then, I was in 11th grade, but I was so caught up in messing around that I dropped out, or, to be more precise, I got expelled. After spending some time idling at home, my mom decided to send me to my maternal grandparents' village to live with my uncles, kind of like a home-based reform school. All my uncles and older relatives there were pretty tough. If you weren't careful, you'd get a beating for sure. In my grandparents' village, almost our entire extended family made a living from the river. Some were fishermen, others ferry operators, and they all took on various side jobs to earn extra money, like retrieving bodies, diving for corpses, installing propellers, or welding boats. Basically, anything that paid, they'd do it. My mom entrusted me to Uncle Rick and Uncle Ben, who were very strict, but also cared deeply for their nephews and nieces. Their work was relatively easy, but it kept them on the river all day, which made my mom feel very secure and trusting. Typically, every river has a few shallow sandbars, especially in winter. During this season, water levels are low and there's little rain or flooding, so the water is very shallow. Boats struggle to pass these sandbars. If they don't navigate the correct channel, they can get stuck for a month until the water rises again, which is extremely dangerous. When that happens, they usually have to hire another boat to pull them free. At such shallow spots, a group of people would offer a boat towing service. They'd acquire a few motorboats, plant flags in the middle of the river, and spend their days waiting for boats to pass through the channel, collecting fees. In the past, each boat paid only a few tens of thousands of dong, but with hundreds of boats passing daily, the income was substantial. It was like an insurance service. If you bought a ticket and your boat got stuck, we would tow you out with our motorboat without charging an extra penny, and we'd guide your boat through the correct channel to pass the sandbar. If you didn't buy a ticket, that was fine, no one forced you. But if you got stuck, you'd be left to fend for yourself until you pleaded for help, and then it would cost tens of millions, just like that. So, most boats passing through had to buy a ticket. My two uncles and several cousins worked in this business. They had some influence and connections, so their operations were quite smooth and successful. When I arrived, I was tasked with cooking and washing clothes for them. I was even strictly forbidden from going ashore for shopping. Living on the boat 24/7 was pretty boring at first, but gradually I got used to it and even started to like it. After a while, I learned how to drive a small boat and was assigned the responsibility of collecting tickets. The heavy work of towing boats was left to the others. Our team had 3 boats anchored with flags in the middle of the river, looking quite impressive, like a military outpost. When I first arrived, I was curious and asked about floating bodies. The men told me they encountered them quite often. I'd been there for almost a week when I saw one myself. It was around noon, the body was quite far away, so I couldn't see it clearly, only smelled a foul, pungent odor. Generally, I wasn't scared, but by night, I felt a bit unnerved. I tend to be imaginative, always scaring myself, like imagining a ghost pulling me into the river in the middle of the night, or that the drowned person was lying right next to me, separated only by a sheet of corrugated iron. One evening, my 2 uncles invited some relatives over for drinks. There were 4 men, all local boatmen. The oldest, around 70, was Old Man Tam, my maternal grandmother's younger brother. Despite his age, he was quite strong. His main job was fishing, and in his free time, he often took on grave-digging jobs. He also had a side gig retrieving bodies. If a body washed ashore and the authorities couldn't handle it, or if the deceased's family hired him, he would pull it up. The fee for pulling it ashore was one sum, and the cost for carrying it for burial was another. Each job ranged from a few $100,000 to several million, depending on the family. Old Man Tam was also quite cunning. My uncles told me that whenever he was idle and encountered a floating body, he'd gently guide it close to the shore and stake it there. The villagers working in the fields would see it, make a fuss, and word would spread to the local authorities. The officials would then grudgingly bring money to hire him to push it back out. He did this often. The authorities knew his tricks but couldn't do anything about it, so they'd reluctantly hire him. But despite his antics, he was kind-hearted. He never truly let the bodies drift away. After taking the money, he'd wait for everyone to leave, then quietly pull the body onto the bank in the evening for a proper burial. This was his way of accumulating good karma. Thanks to this, there were a few times when people found their missing relatives and asked him to exhume the bodies to take them back to their hometowns for burial. He was a lanky old man, his skin weathered and sun-darkened, wearing a faded green military uniform and a pith helmet. He looked very rustic and down-to-earth. Uncle Ben had bought a rather large catfish and a pile of spiny eels that day, which looked delicious. The catfish was steamed, and the eels were stewed with fermented rice and bananas. I wasn't familiar with this dish, so I just helped pick water mimosa. Uncle Ben and my cousin went out to collect ticket fees, while Uncle Rick sat drinking water and chatting with Old Man Tam and the other older relatives. Around 8:00 p.m., we started eating. I don't drink alcohol, so I joined my cousin to collect fees in place of the others. It was almost midnight, and the men were still lingering, chatting endlessly. My cousin and I had been working since evening and were quite tired, but no one offered to relieve us so we could rest. It wasn't until 1 a.m. that Uncle Ben finally called it quits, saying we didn't need to collect fees anymore. It was too late, and few boats were passing. Plus, the tide was high today, so no boats would get stuck. If any did, we'd deal with it tomorrow morning. Everyone was pretty tipsy. The 3 other older men took their boats home to sleep with their wives and children. My uncle and my 2 cousins found a few nearby boats to sleep in. Old Man Tam was the drunkest, slumped right where he sat, which, unfortunately, was my sleeping spot. I was exhausted, so I had to lie down next to him. He smelled quite bad, so I didn't dare share a blanket, just grabbed my jacket and threw it over myself. Tired from the day, I slept like a log, completely oblivious. As was my habit, I gradually woke up around 5 a.m. I usually got up to use the restroom, then went back to sleep. As I lay in a semi-conscious state, my nose detected the faint smell of a drowned person, though I wasn't entirely sure. But it was unmistakable. A foul, pungent stench assailed my nostrils, incredibly sickening, making it impossible to drift back to sleep. I figured there must be a body floating nearby. It was twilight, and the fog hung low and cold. I decided to try and lie still, hoping the smell would pass so I could get up and relieve myself later, despite already feeling the urge. Lying there, my heart pounded, and my hands clenched to distract myself. The most horrifying thing was the stench of death persistently assaulting my nose. Why was it still lingering? Why hadn't it faded? Just as I was about to wake Old Man Tam and ask, I heard a rattling sound from Uncle Ben's boat next door. Knowing he was awake, my fear subsided, and I sat up to crawl outside. The moment I poked my head out, I heard him shout, "Hey, wake Old Man Tam up. Old Man Tam, what in the world have you done?" Confused, I asked Uncle Ben, "What's wrong, Uncle? Old Man Tam is sleeping right here with me." I'd completely forgotten about the smell of the corpse. Uncle Ben frowned, pointing at me. "Damn it, look behind you. What's Old Man Tam tied to the stern of his boat? This old man is truly reckless, doing this at people's place of business." I turned around to look and almost fainted. Faintly visible next to Old Man Tam's boat was a white object bobbing in the water, looking exactly like a person. Strands of black hair floated on the surface, and the back and hips rose high, swaying with the waves. From its neck, a short rope was securely tied to Old Man Tam's boat pole. I couldn't see its hands, but I could vaguely make out pale white heels. I froze for a moment, then gasped, "Oh, it's a dead person." After saying that, my mouth went dry, my heart pounded wildly, my limbs trembled uncontrollably. I wanted to run, but I couldn't move. Where would I even run to? Around these small, rocking boats? Or would I jump into the freezing water and swim to shore? Hearing the commotion, the others woke up and poked their heads out to see what was happening. Uncle Rick looked down at the corpse with a grimace but said nothing. My 2 cousins, however, stared at each other, gesturing wildly. I calmed down a little and looked inside the tent, seeing Old Man Tam still lying motionless. Uncle Rick urged again, "Go wake him up." He managed to get up in the middle of the night to drag a body here, so he can wake up now. "Hurry up, we need to guide the boats through the channel." I went in, sat beside him, and pulled the blanket off his face. His body was freezing cold, his eyes and mouth shriveled. I called him repeatedly, but he didn't open his eyes, so I called both uncles in. As soon as they crawled in, Old Man Tam propped himself up and sat. Seeing this, Uncle Rick shouted, "All right, old man, get up quickly and take your body wherever you need to. It's unsanitary. Hurry up so the boys can work." Old Man Tam mumbled weakly. "Last night around 4 a.m., I smelled a drowned body, so I got up to check and found it bumping right against the bow of my boat. I tied it up intending to pull it to the bank, but I got a headache from the cold wind, so I crawled back in and fell asleep." After that, he got up, grabbed his water pipe leaning against the wall, lit it, took a long drag, and dreamily exhaled smoke to clear his head. Everyone and I stood at the bow of the boat, waiting for him to deal with it. He slowly and weakly climbed out of my boat and stepped onto his own, where the body was tied. The corpse was face down, its face submerged, bobbing with the waves, its head rhythmically knocking against the boat's side like a bell. Old Man Tam fumbled, untying the rope from the oar post and retying it to the stern of his boat. His was a small boat with 2 manual oars, not a motorboat like ours. As he was about to untie the last rope from the body's neck, Uncle Rick spoke up. "Untie the rope from its neck and tie it somewhere else, old man. It's bad luck. It looks like you're chaining a dog. And is it a man or a woman? Face down, probably a man. Hurry up, it stinks." Old Man Tam heard but didn't reply, silently complying. He turned, his hand fumbling around the corpse's neck to find the knot. It seemed the knot had slipped lower, so he had to reach down towards the throat. Unable to find it, he braced himself and flipped the body over. The corpse was quite heavy, slowly turning from face down to face up. The body's left arm, stiff and rigid, swung out, hitting his hand and then striking his neck. Drowned bodies are stiff, their limbs rigid. He winced for a moment, then managed to flip the corpse over. That was the most horrifying scene I had ever witnessed. I was terrified, but standing among the others, I pretended not to be scared to show off to my uncles and cousins. After all, we were river folk. If we were afraid of such things, we might as well go home to our mothers. But at this point, I truly couldn't control myself anymore. The corpse, now face up, was many times more gruesome than when it was face down. It was a woman, not a man, wearing a white autumn-winter shirt and black stretch pants. The body must have been in the water for over a week. The flesh was swollen to its maximum, looking like an obese person squeezed into tight clothes. Everywhere was bloated and taut. I imagined that if you just pricked it with a small needle, it would explode like a balloon. The victim's face was no longer intact, disfigured by fish nibbling at it, with chunks of flesh torn away, only small bits of skin and tissue loosely clinging to the surface. In the river, spiny eels are the fish that most commonly nibble on dead bodies, the very kind I had eaten last night. The thought suddenly made me feel sick to my stomach, though I had to admit its flesh was truly delicious and fragrant, but nothing compared to the horror of seeing her chest. This was likely the victim of a robbery, murder, and assault. A knife was plunged into the middle of her chest, all the way to the hilt. With the body face up, a small amount of dark blood seeped from the wound. It looked like she wasn't wearing a bra, and her clothes were disheveled, one side pulled down low. In that scene, I dared not imagine what other terrible things might have happened. Old Man Tam reached for the knot at the body's neck and untied it, then retied it around the left wrist. With that done, he sat leaning against a plank, spreading his legs to paddle, guiding the boat towards the opposite bank. There, near an old bamboo thicket, was the leaf-thatched hut he'd built for stormy days, where he often tied up drowned bodies. The small boat slowly cut across the water, pulling the corpse behind it. The body jerked back and forth with Old Man Tam's paddling rhythm. After a while, the small boat gradually disappeared into the fog, only vaguely visible, conjuring images of pitiful enslaved people from old times, dragged away in chains. A little while later, everything settled down and the lingering stench gradually faded. In the distance, amid the river, the red and green lights of a fleet of boats appeared, steadily approaching, preparing to navigate the shallow channel. Today marked the highest tide. In just a few hours, the water would begin to recede. Any boat unable to pass in time would have to wait for the next tide. We all returned to our respective duties. I took the opportunity to clean up and prepare breakfast for everyone. Uncle Rick and Uncle Ben sped off in their boats to collect fees and guide the channel. Today, the first boats to pass were two massive coal carriers. These two must have been waiting nearby since last night, daring to cross the channel only after the fog had cleared. After collecting fees from those two, my uncles continued on to the next boats. Today, with the high tide, Uncle Ben was probably overconfident and didn't guide them through the correct channel. The first boat surged towards the shallowest section, passing about 40 meters from where my boat was docked. It suddenly hit the sandbar, jolted, and swerved sideways, its stern swinging violently towards my boat. The three men and I standing there were so startled, we didn't know what to do as the boat's stern bore down on us. Then, without a word, we all quickly untied our boats from their posts and dove into the water, swimming frantically. The stern crashed into our boats, almost sinking them all. Luckily, the water there was shallow, which helped slow the boat down. Not long after, the large boat following behind also veered off course and ran aground. The two boats, nose to nose, completely blocked the river. The channel here was narrow. If these two couldn't be freed, the channel would be closed and no other boats could pass. By 11 a.m., even the smaller boats in the shallow water had to drop anchor or pull ashore to wait. Only empty boats could pass. Hundreds of boats were anchored, stretching as far as the eye could see on both sides. Uncle Rick said there was one last tide tonight. If they couldn't get through, they'd be stuck for over 10 days before the channel reopened. Seeing hundreds of boats clustered together was startling. It was the first time I'd seen so many. Everyone and I split up, going to each boat to collect fees. A day like this brought in a good amount of money, but my uncles gambled a lot, so they didn't save much. Tonight, there would probably be dozens of gambling dens opening up. Boat people are known for their craving for gambling. While collecting money, I heard people complaining and discussing the body that was still docked nearby. Several boats hadn't seen it clearly in the morning, so they had anchored close. They must have been about to lose it, but couldn't back away. Seeing this, Uncle Rick told me to go with him to Old Man Tam's house and urge him to deal with the body. At this rate, the only option was to make him retrieve it and bury it immediately, as boats were docked all around, making it impossible to tow it out. I had been here for a long time, but this was my first visit to Old Man Tam's house. As I approached the body, I saw it lying half on the bank, half in the water, caught in a bamboo root. Its head was pointed directly towards the front of his shack. It looked exactly like someone abandoning something. Most of its hair had fallen out, its head was bald, and its limbs and face were starting to get sunburned, turning dark and grayish. It was terribly unsanitary. Large blowflies, as big as chopsticks, with fiery red eyes and bluish-green bodies, swarmed all around, feasting on the corpse and laying their eggs. If it wasn't buried immediately, tomorrow morning it would be crawling with maggots, an even more gruesome sight. Old Man Tam's house looked rather rundown, roofed with sugarcane leaves. Its walls were patched together from various pieces of scrap wood he'd salvaged from the river, mostly old altars, making it resemble a funeral parlor. As we approached, Uncle Rick called out loudly, but there was no reply, only the wooden door slightly ajar. My uncle and I assumed he was sleeping, so we pushed the door open. It felt stuck at the hinge. I used both hands to push it harder. We both looked down at our feet, and right in front of us, Old Man Tam lay sprawled on the floor in the middle of the house. Fearing something was wrong, I knelt and shook him, but he was ice cold and stiff. Uncle Rick kicked the two doors wide open and flung open the window to let in light. Old Man Tam must have suffered a sudden death from a cold. His eyes were wide open, showing only the whites, his mouth agape, with a little dried blood around his nose and mouth, some of it even splattered on the floor. I was in a panic, not knowing what to do, just stammering. Uncle Rick shouted, telling me to go to the river and call for help. I immediately complied. As I ran past the body, a short distance away, for some reason I turned back to look. A fleeting realization struck me. Old Man Tam's posture and the corpse's posture looked very similar, if not identical. Both were lying face down, chin to the ground, with their arms wrapped around their heads. And notably, if you looked closely, the corpse and Old Man Tam were lying in a straight line, facing each other. I ran like mad along the riverbank, looking for the boats of his sons, my uncles. A little while later, all the relatives gathered, and my parents also came up from our hometown. Everyone, along with my two uncles, confirmed that he had died suddenly from a cold stroke and discussed taking him to his eldest son's house in the village to arrange the funeral. The path from the sandbar to the village was rough and difficult, so he was wrapped in a blanket, placed on a makeshift cart, covered with a mat, and then pulled away. Everyone was focused on arranging his funeral, so no one paid attention to the floating corpse lying dried and hidden in the nearby bamboo thicket. Moreover, being upwind, its smell didn't carry. After the cart had traveled a short distance, Old Man Tam's dog, which was chained near the house, suddenly broke free and bolted towards the bamboo thicket, disappearing from sight. A few people chased after it, trying to catch it, but it was too fast. Since he was old and all his children were grown, there was no weeping at the funeral. Everyone focused on buying food, mourning clothes, and setting up the canopy. His family invited a village monk to perform the last rites. The sons were in charge of washing, changing clothes, and cleaning the dried blood from his face, as well as tightly binding his stomach with cloth before placing him in the center of the house for the monk's ceremony. For some reason, Old Man Tam's eyes remained wide open even in death. Everyone tried every method, but couldn't get his eyes to close, so they had to ask the monk for help. After the rites were complete and he was prepared for the coffin, the monk pulled a small red cloth bag from his belongings and placed it in Old Man Tam's mouth. Then, he covered his face with a sheet of votive paper and continued chanting. After chanting, the monk clasped his hands, bowed 3 more times, and then gently lifted the votive paper from Old Man Tam's face. For some reason, his eyes were now closed, and his mouth was no longer agape as before. A moment later, everyone around was horrified to see fresh red blood oozing from his mouth, nose, and ears. The monk's face hardened, and he told everyone to wipe the blood from Old Man Tam. A moment later, the monk said, "Old Man Tam was taken by a spirit from the river. Out on the river, they've formed a gang now. The karma from your family's past hasn't been repaid yet. Tomorrow, you must bury him before 5:00 a.m. Even I cannot help with this. Karma from ancient times, who caused it? Now, it has materialized into a gang demanding retribution." The family members felt a little uneasy hearing this, but seemed not to fully believe it, as this monk was quite young to be the abbot of such a small village temple. Besides, Old Man Tam had lived a fairly decent life. Apart from retrieving bodies and digging graves, there was nothing else. After the rites, I went to where my mother was sitting, chatting with some elderly folks in the yard. I planned to greet her and then quickly head to the river to relieve the others. When I got there, I heard the women chattering excitedly, especially the old ladies. They were saying that when Old Man Tam and his wife were young, they ferried a girl from one side of the river to the other to cut grass. Midway across, they encountered strong waves, and the boat capsized. Old Man Tam and his wife managed to swim to shore, but the girl drowned, and her body was never found. After listening for a bit, I slipped away because I detested crowded places like that. I stayed alone, guarding the boats, while the others took the opportunity to attend the funeral. It was fortunate that Old Man Tam died on a day when everyone was free. Otherwise, they would have been swamped. Sleeping alone with nothing to do, I wandered over to visit some nearby boats. River folk are naturally easygoing and friendly, and knowing I was part of the channel guiding team, they welcomed me warmly. We chatted intimately. Having been docked there all day, everyone had to go ashore to buy food. I figured if we stayed here for a few more days, all the chickens, ducks, vegetables, and fruit in this hamlet would be gone. While sitting, smoking my water pipe, and chatting with the boat owner's son, I heard a commotion outside like someone screaming. I rushed to the railing to look and saw a woman, about 40 years old, standing amidst a crowd, gesticulating wildly, describing something. Intrigued, I ran over to see, and it turned out she had just been scared. She was panting, her face drained of all color. As she explained, it seemed she'd had quite a serious encounter. She said she had gone ashore to buy a chicken, and as she was almost back to the river, a girl's voice from behind called out, "Sister, help me." She turned to see a long-haired girl in a white shirt looking at her, then turning and running away. The woman, thinking it was someone from the boat hamlet who was in trouble, chased after her. When she reached the bamboo thicket, no one was there. She shined her flashlight around and saw only a single dog gnawing on the arm of a floating corpse. Terrified, she dropped the flashlight and ran back here, screaming. I don't know if ghosts are real, but the dog's story was probably true. Perhaps it was Old Man Tam's dog. It had broken free and was too hungry, so it went to gnaw on the body. This wasn't unusual. When I was still at home, I often heard my mother tell such stories. She said that drowned bodies washed ashore were often scavenged by stray dogs, especially those from wandering fishing boats. These dogs might go days without food, so they would scavenge for dead pigs or chickens. My mother even mentioned that when she lived with my grandmother, they often saw dogs bringing skulls back to the alley entrance and gnawing on them. Each time, my grandmother would say it was a pig's head and quietly throw it back into the river. The boatmen standing there, listening to her story, all burst into laughter and decided to go investigate whether there were any ghosts. True to their word, they grabbed their flashlights and set off. I was also free, so I went along to see if there were really ghosts, as I had never seen one since I was a child. About 10 people, armed with flashlights, headed out together. As we drew near, everyone covered their noses due to the pungent stench. A few women couldn't stomach it, retching and throwing up, not daring to get any closer, so they stopped to watch from afar. When we reached the bamboo roots and shined our lights, the body was no longer there. Only a segment from the elbow to the hand, still tied with a rope, remained. Everyone assumed the dog had eaten the entire body or dragged it away somewhere. But how could just one dog eat or drag away a whole corpse? Even an entire pack of dogs couldn't manage that. Besides, the smell was still very strong. The body must have been close by. The men continued to shine their lights further offshore, and about 30 meters away, something vaguely bobbed into view. Everyone exclaimed it was the body, speculating that the dog had tugged so hard, and the flesh of the long-dead body had decomposed and torn, causing it to break free and drift away. It was high tide then, which coincidentally carried the corpse out. Then, an older man broke off a bamboo branch, used it to pry the noose from the arm, and flung the arm into the river. He said it was best to throw it in, otherwise, the dog might come back later and drag away the rest, which would be terrible. A little later, everyone dispersed, and I had no idea what would happen to the body. Surrounded by boats, how could it escape from here? I just hoped it would sink soon so I wouldn't have to see it anymore. I wandered back to my boat to hang out, and in the distance, I saw the silhouettes of some late-night working girls paddling their boats towards us. They really sniff out money fast. They appeared in just a few hours. Here, they could find plenty of clients, only worrying if they had the energy to entertain boatmen who'd been deprived of affection for a long time. Let's see, there were 3 of them, each in a small, hand-paddled boat. These boats were probably borrowed from nearby fishermen, as professional workers usually had motorboats. The girls circled the fleet of boats, looking for customers. If a man was interested, he'd jump down and crawl into their tent. I was free, so I sat and watched, finding it occasionally amusing. Some men would enter a tent for a few minutes, then awkwardly crawl out, arguing with the girl. I vaguely heard that they seemed to have finished almost as soon as they started. The girl would demand more money to continue, while the man would object, saying he hadn't gotten anything for his money. Who was right or wrong, I didn't know. I considered going to some nearby family boats to flirt with the daughters there to pass the time. Those boats had really pretty daughters. When I got there, I saw 2 sisters doing laundry. I was about to approach and strike up a conversation when I saw her holding up a pile of underwear to wash. How awkward. Feeling a bit embarrassed, I turned back. It was only a little past 10 p.m. How would I pass the rest of the night? Sleeping alone was terrifying. I kept cringing at the thought of the dead body. What if in the middle of the night, the corpse wriggled its way to my boat and lay next to it? I suddenly yearned to go home, missing my parents and even my girlfriend from school. Back then, I did have a girlfriend named Leon. She was beautiful. We were quite close. Not being by her side, I wondered if she was getting involved with anyone else. By this time, I was also 18. A crazy idea suddenly popped into my head. I would call Leon and ask her to come here. She lived in the school dormitory. If I could reach her by phone, and the dorm wasn't closed yet, the chances of success were very high. No sooner said than done. I ran to borrow a phone from a man on a boat and called the dorm supervisor, asking to speak to Leon. I had a knack for imitating a girl's voice on the phone, ensuring no one would recognize me. I pretended to be Leon's older sister and asked to speak to her about an urgent matter. After some pleading, the old man went to call her and told me to wait. When I finally got her, I sweet-talked her, told her about the favorable situation here, gave her the coordinates, and told her to take a motorbike taxi here. Leon loved me fiercely and was quite reckless. She agreed immediately and told me to wait for her. I was overjoyed as if I'd struck gold, my heart pounding with an indescribable lightness. The feeling of being about to see the person I loved, to talk and hold hands, was absolutely wonderful and thrilling. From her school to here was almost 30 km, and with slow travel and finding the way, it would take about an hour to arrive. I took the opportunity to shower again to smell nice, rummaged through my backpack for facial cleanser and shampoo, and found a new set of clothes I hadn't worn yet. Since being reformed, here, I looked completely different, darker, scruffier, and less handsome than before, but a bit more robust. I jumped into the river, washed thoroughly, put on my new clothes, then jumped onto a neighboring boat to use their mirror. It had been ages since I last looked in a mirror. I was so disappointed. Was this really the man who used to be the dream of so many girls? Oh well, I figured she'd still like me. With everything ready, I asked the boatman nearby to keep an eye on our boats, then cheerfully walked up the village dike to wait for her. To get to that spot, I had to pass near Old Man Tam's bamboo thicket. Otherwise, I'd have to cut through the cornfield. Cutting through the cornfield would be dirty and itchy. At this moment, I was happy and fearless, so I decided to go past the bamboo thicket. As I approached, my mind suddenly recalled the incident where the woman saw a ghost last night, making me nervous. I just put my head down and ran past quickly. After running a considerable distance, I stopped, realizing I was just scaring myself. There was no ghost or evil spirit to be seen. After waiting for about 15 minutes, Leanne arrived by motorbike taxi. It had been a long time, but she was as beautiful as ever: long hair, fair skin, a round face, and a slender figure. She wore black fabric pants and a long-sleeved white t-shirt. This outfit was quite similar to the one worn by the drowned girl. I invited her to the riverbank to get on the boat. We walked cheerfully, hand in hand. Every now and then, I would stop and kiss her cheek, just for the affection. Walking and chatting, joking around, being with my girlfriend felt different, a sense of peace and carefree joy. As we reached the bamboo thicket, we again smelled the pungent odor of the corpse. It must have been the smell from the arm that Old Man Tam had thrown into the river, so it wasn't too strong. Leanne covered her mouth with both hands and asked what that smell was. I lied and said it was a dead pig. She believed me right away because she had never encountered or smelled a drowned person before. After walking a bit further, she complained she was tired and wanted to rest. We sat down on the grassy verge, using our sandals as cushions. After a moment, I leaned over and kissed Leanne. We kissed passionately. I took off my jacket, spread it on the grass, and gently eased Leanne down. In the quiet space, we continued to exchange kisses. As we were kissing, Leanne pushed my head away with both hands, mumbling, "Stop, honey, someone's watching, someone's watching." I looked around, saw no one, and was about to continue when Leanne pushed me harder, sat up completely, and pulled her shirt down. "I told you someone's there, stop it." I looked again, still seeing no one, thinking she was just seeing things. I asked her again. Leanne pointed towards the bamboo thicket. "Over there, a white shirt is walking there. Just now, that woman was standing near us, staring at us. I'm so scared." I looked in the direction Leanne was pointing, still seeing nothing, but in my mind, I thought she really saw something. Her description matched exactly what the woman had seen last night, and it was in the direction of the bamboo thicket. Okay, it must be the ghost of the drowned girl lingering around here, scaring people. I tried to remain calm and urged Leanne to go back to the boat. We both jumped into my boat. I pulled down the curtains on both sides. We lay together on the small boat. The boat swayed gently with each wave like a cradle. Leanne rested her head on my arm, her hand wrapped across my chest, embracing my waist. We lay in silence, not saying a word. At that moment, I truly felt immense peace and happiness. Then she suddenly whispered, "Honey, if I ever die in the river someday, you have to find my body, okay?" Her words startled me. Was she possessed by a ghost in the middle of the night, spouting such unlucky things? "What nonsense are you talking about? It's the middle of the night, don't be silly, that's a bad omen." "I don't know," she replied. "It just came to me. Sleeping on this tiny boat on the river, I'm so scared, honey. I don't even know how to swim." It turned out she was just rambling, not possessed, as I had imagined. With that, I pulled her tight into my embrace, kissed her eyes, and we continued kissing. What was wrong with today? Every time things got heated, we were interrupted. The boatman next door called out, asking to borrow a cable, and I had to crawl out to find it for him. It was so annoying. Done with that, I went to untie the boat, intending to move further downstream for some peace and quiet, away from prying eyes and interruptions. What if those men thought Leanne was disreputable? It would be a huge blot on my girlfriend's reputation. Drifting down about 100 meters, I pulled into a small sandbar, threw a small anchor ashore, then secured the boat engine. Here it was just us, alone to do as we pleased. And so the couple in the small boat entwined again. I won't describe this part in detail, suffice to say it was wonderful. Leon was very fair-skinned with a perfect figure. She was beautiful inside and out. After we were both satisfied, I felt quite tired. It had been the night before, and I hadn't slept all day. Lying, holding Leon, we slept naked in each other's arms. As I was drifting off, Leon shook me. "Honey, turn on the light. Something fell on my chest and it smells like blood." I grabbed the flashlight and shined it on her chest, seeing a drop of fresh red blood as big as a chopstick tip between her breasts. I shined the light on the thatched roof and around us but saw nothing else. We were both scared, reassuring each other that it must have been blood from a mosquito bite. But deep down, we knew it wasn't mosquito blood. To this day, I still don't understand what happened. We continued to sleep. Around 4:00 a.m., I was in a daze, sensing something was wrong. It was cold and the boat seemed to be drifting freely. I was still sleeping soundly, in a stupor, driven by instinct, much like when one dreams of falling and suddenly wakes up just before hitting the ground. With my eyes still closed, I reached out beside me, but Leon wasn't there. I jolted awake, opened the tarp at the stern, but couldn't see her. I rushed outside to look and realized the boat really was drifting, far out in the middle of the river, but Leon was nowhere to be seen. Turning to look towards the bow, I saw Leon naked, standing right at the edge of the boat, seemingly about to jump into the river. I yelled, "Leon, come back here." She still didn't pay any attention to me, suddenly took another step, and stumbled, falling into the river. Seeing this, I immediately jumped in and swam towards her. Leon flailed her arms in the water for a moment, then sank. I reached the spot and dived down to find her. It was pitch black. I couldn't see anything, just groped around underwater, but she was nowhere. I was out of breath, intending to surface for air, then dive down again. Suddenly, I felt Leon's hand brush against mine. I pushed down, trying to grab her armpit to pull her up, even though I felt breathless and my ears ached to my brain. The moment my hand touched her chest, Leon lunged up. Her two hands wrapped around my head, pulling me down. We struggled in the water. I felt like I was about to drown. Instinctively, my mouth and nose, starved for air, kept gulping water. Then, I bent my legs and kicked her hard. After a struggle, her hands let go. I surfaced, but still felt my arm thrashing weakly in the water. Surfacing, I knew I was still alive. After catching my breath for a moment, thinking of Leon still below, I decided to go down and pull her up no matter what. I didn't think much, just plunged down, groping and trying to pinpoint her last position. After diving about 4 meters, I hit the bottom, and my hand touched her head. I grabbed her hair with both hands, then pushed hard off the riverbed with my feet to propel myself upwards. She didn't seem to be dead yet, as her head kept thumping against my hand. After pulling her completely out of the water, I stretched out, clinging to the boat's edge, and managed to pull her in. Her body was limp and ice cold. Her face was pale, her lips dark blue, even her nipples had shriveled and turned dark. I pulled her entirely into the tent, fumbled for the flashlight, switched it on, and placed it nearby. I pressed on her chest for a moment, and she spat out water, then began to breathe. Only then, calming down, did I realize I had been crying without knowing it. Leon also started to cry. It's truly at the boundary between life and death that one realizes how terrifying it is. How frightening it is to witness the loss of someone you love with your own eyes. We hugged for a while, then found clothes to put on. Leon sat quietly in the tent while I went out, started the engine, and sped back. What had happened? My boat was securely anchored. Why had Leon suddenly jumped into the river like a soulless person? Anyway, we were lucky, and from now on, I would never dare to bring my loved ones out onto the river like that again. It was a lesson learned. If you ever have to rescue a drowning person, you should wait until they are almost exhausted before jumping in, or they might drag you down with them. That's why many skilled swimmers still drown with non-swimmers. I waited until about 6 a.m., then led Leon to the road to catch a motorbike taxi home. Once that was sorted, I hesitantly dropped by the funeral to see if Old Man Tam had been buried yet. I also wanted to ask my mom if I could go home because I was thoroughly terrified. Staying here any longer felt like risking death at any moment. At the funeral, it was still very crowded. The flags, gongs, drums, and the hearse were all still there. I thought they were supposed to have buried him before 5 a.m., as the monk had instructed. I asked my mom and learned that as the pallbearers carried the coffin out the door, the two men at the front suddenly tripped over the wooden threshold, falling flat and dropping the coffin. Old Man Tam's coffin broke apart, with two panels coming loose and one snapping, making it unusable. The family must have bought cheap wood. Everyone had to wait for the family to go buy a new coffin. I stayed for a bit, then everything was sorted and they prepared to carry him away. As the monk finished the burial ritual and people started filling the grave with soil, something happened. Old Man Tam's youngest daughter, standing at the edge of the grave, holding her small child, suddenly threw the baby to the ground and jumped into the burial pit. Her face was fierce, her eyes wide, teeth bared like a cat's as she pounded on the coffin, screaming, "My time wasn't up. Why did you kill me? Why did you kill me? Your whole family will follow you." With that, she collapsed onto Old Man Tam's coffin, passing out. People pulled her out of the grave and massaged her arms and legs. A moment later, she regained consciousness. When asked if she remembered anything, she stammered, saying she didn't know. Everyone thought she was possessed and gathered around the monk to ask for an explanation. The monk merely said, "I told you he had to be buried before 5 a.m. or something would happen." Just now, the spirit of the girl who died an unjust death at our village's river crossing possessed her, demanding retribution. To die an unjust death means to die before one's destined time due to wrongful harm. Such spirits have no resting place. They cannot ascend to heaven nor descend to hell. They cannot reincarnate and find peace, so they wander, demanding lives. Your family should ask a master to set up an altar at the river to redress the injustice and create a substitute effigy for your family members. I cannot perform this ritual. You must seek out Master X. After the monk finished speaking, everyone began to murmur and worry. Some said the spirit was the girl who drowned in the ferry incident long ago. Others claimed it was because Old Man Tam had dismembered the floating corpse by the riverbank and it had taken his life. The commotion made it hard to know what to believe. I, however, believed it because I had witnessed events 3 times last night. The more I thought about it, the more terrified I became. On the way back to Old Man Tam's house, I asked my mom if I could go home, but she flat out refused. She seemed not to trust me much, even telling Uncle Rick to keep a tighter watch on me. I was fuming, thinking of making a desperate move, like running away right then and there. But where would I get money? Should I steal from my uncle? No, that wouldn't do. I had a principle. I would only mess with my family's money, never anyone else's. Besides, the last time I ran away, I got into a fight and ended up with dozens of stitches in my head. And if I left now, my mom would surely go to Leon's school and make her life miserable. Billions of reasons to stay here. All right, fine. With my uncle and cousins around now, I guess I'd be safe. I went to the funeral feast, ate my fill, then headed back to the boat. Exhausted, I fell into a deep sleep and didn't wake until the afternoon. In the afternoon, my uncle came out and told me to take the boat with him to check the channel in a few sections, to see if erosion had shifted anything. With boats docked haphazardly like this, and the strong current, sand often piled up. While we were tinkering in the middle of the river, I casually asked about Old Man Tam's house, and the story of him and his wife causing someone's death when they were young. My uncle pointed into the distance, right to the spot in the middle of the river where my boat had drifted at dawn, and said that Old Man Tam's boat had sunk right there, long ago. I was startled, thinking, could there be such a coincidence again? Or was it just a coincidence that the boat drifted there and Leon, sleepwalking, jumped into the river? Imagining further, perhaps the drowned woman from all those years ago had possessed Leon, then untied the boat and brought it to the place where she died, intending to pull Leon down with her. After circling, I realized the floating corpse from yesterday was nowhere to be seen. It must have sunk. I didn't know if it had sunk here or managed to slip through the line of boats docked outside. Wherever it sank, I just hoped it wouldn't come to my main base and rest there. I jumped down to bathe, and when my relative and I met underwater, I was terrified. Sometimes I also felt pity. Where was she from, to have her body lie at the bottom of the river and her soul become food for fish like this? My uncle saw a boat belonging to a cousin nearby and told me to go over and visit. We found the 2 cousins diligently untangling their nets. It must have been a good catch, as they had nothing but spiny eels. There were indeed many fish, and all of them were large. A moment later, they pulled up a huge one. Uncle Rick, I don't know if he was joking or serious, said, "When there are big fish like this, it means there's a drowned person nearby. Back when I fished with Grandma, we always encountered this." He urged them, "Pull it up quickly, or it'll get tangled in the net now." I didn't know if it was true, but the couple nodded and pulled quickly, not even bothering to untangle the net anymore. I was suspicious because I had just seen a floating corpse nearby yesterday. After pulling a few more lengths, the wife felt a heavy tug. She tried to pull more but couldn't lift it. All four of us probably had the same thought. The husband came over to help her pull. After feeling around for over a meter, oily scum started to bubble to the surface, accompanied by that distinctive pungent smell. "Oh, it's really tangled in the net now," he muttered. He continued to pull, and a leg emerged from the water, tangled in the net. It had only been one day, but it looked horrifying. The flesh was completely flayed. Fish had gnawed down to the bone, so mangled that some of the toenails were almost completely detached. The wife waved her hands. No, don't pull it up anymore. Cut the net, honey." The husband continued to pull, grumbling irritably. "I have to pull it up to see how much it's tangled before I can cut it. The net was just bought yesterday, making such a fuss." As he continued to lift, he saw the other leg bent backward, curled into a ball within the net. The corpse's pants had slipped down to its thighs, a truly disgusting sight. He continued to pull forcefully, pressing the net against the boat's side to secure it, his hand holding the section of the net tangled around the chest, slowly working his way up. The upper part gradually emerged from the water. The corpse was no longer intact as it had been the day before. One arm was almost completely severed, and the other was missing from the elbow down. This missing arm was the one that had been thrown into the river yesterday. On the other side, seeing the tattered sleeves, it seemed the dog had probably chewed them off and dragged them away. Generally, all the exposed parts of the body were mangled, a mix of yellow, white, and black. Then the husband casually reached down and pulled the knife from the chest, shaking it in the water to clean off the blood, then tossed it into his boat. The knife was about 30 cm long, double-edged, and sharp-tipped. Seeing the net heavily entangled, the husband's face wrinkled with regret. "I have to untangle it. Cutting it like this will ruin everything. This new net is too precious. Let's pull it into the shallower section, and I'll jump in and untangle it quickly." The husband and wife rolled up both ends of the net onto the boat. The husband steered while the wife held the net, pulling the body towards the shore. The corpse, rolled up in the net like a silkworm cocoon, was dragged along. Behind it, oily scum and bits of yellowish, crabro-colored flesh bloomed and floated on the water's surface. A school of minnows darted in from nowhere, like arrows, scrambling to feed. I was free, so I invited my uncle to follow and watch. As we neared the shore, the husband turned off the engine and jumped down to begin untangling. The corpse didn't fully float to the surface. It just hovered about 40 cm below the water. Perhaps because it had been stabbed, it had lost its internal gases and wasn't bloated enough to float like normal bodies. This person had only been dead for a little over a week. A normal body would only gradually sink after about 10 days when the intestines burst, the stomach ruptures, or the abdomen is punctured. Therefore, the ideal condition for finding a drowned body is within 20 days. Like the cat Chuang case, I suspect the doctor might have punctured the victim's intestines, abdomen, and stomach before throwing her into the river. If that were true, her body would float vaguely, just like the one in front of me now, very hard to see and with very little smell emanating from it. If she was lucky, Ms. Hyen would have gotten caught in a fishing net like this body. But that's rare because bodies usually drift in the middle of the current, along the boat channels. And fishermen never cast their nets in the middle of a boat channel. Floating so vaguely like that makes it easy to get sucked into a boat's propeller, and if it gets into a propeller, it's just shattered to smithereens. Today, the sandbar was bustling with people. First, one or two people nearby spotted the untangling of the corpse, then whispered to each other, drawing a thick crowd to the bank to watch. I got the impression the man was shaking badly. His hands and feet unsteady, he waded into the water up to his chest, grappling with the body. This was no simple task. He pulled it back and forth, flipped it over and over, untangling it bit by bit. It was as difficult as dressing a child. When a section was untangled but flesh clung to the net, he'd shake the net in the water to dislodge it. If a piece of flesh was too stubborn to come off, he'd have to use his hand to smooth it off and flick his hand, sending the flesh flying outward. The hardest parts were probably the head and the two severed arms. At the head, the flesh was most severely detached. The scalp and hair were wrapped around the net lines, clinging so tightly that even wiping it with his hand didn't remove it all. The arms were better, only flesh stuck to them. At the shoulders, the bone was clearly visible, like someone whose joint had been dislocated. It had only been about 15 minutes, and even people from the village had come out to watch. Some middle-aged women loudly called out to the man untangling the net, telling him to finish and pull it to shore so people could report it to the authorities to retrieve and bury it. The man, however, pretended not to hear, focusing intently on freeing his net. Truly, no one is like our people here. Everyone just loves to watch and offers help with their mouths. People on shore, hearing that river folk treated drowned bodies like dead pigs or chickens, ignoring them or not reporting them to the police, some considered it heartless and cruel. But look, what help did that crowd on shore offer? Did they just stand there, gossip for a while, then dust off their butts and leave? Did anyone dare to step up, retrieve the body, perform the procedures, and bury the person? Well, some people did go report it to the police, but truthfully, reporting to the police was often useless. Unless there was a directive from higher-ups, few local police officers dared to get involved. Within the profession, there seemed to be an unspoken rule not to spontaneously handle these floating corpses. The local budget would incur significant expenses for the funeral, and it would also burden criminal investigators and forensic doctors. So, no one was foolish enough to tie their own knot. Therefore, keyboard warriors on the internet shouldn't sit behind screens and preach morality. If you're so brave, go out into the middle of the river and see how you handle encountering a few floating bodies every day. Finally, after a struggle with the body, he was almost done. The wife on the boat took the opportunity to help her husband shake the net clean. Why clean it? Why not just leave it and keep fishing? The smell of rotten human flesh was the most addictive, after all. From a distance, a boat resembling a ferry suddenly sped straight towards this area. On the boat, a man clung to the side with one hand, pointing directly towards us with the other. As they got closer, I saw clearly that they were two ferry operators from the upper ferry terminal. I didn't know what they wanted, but it certainly wasn't to look at the corpse. A moment later, their boat arrived, mooring alongside mine. The two men, around 30 years old, were brothers. They greeted my uncle, then rushed over, staring intensely at the body, examining it very carefully. Uncle Rick asked, "What are you two doing here, not ferrying? Are you trying to steal my channel?" The older brother quickly replied, "You're joking, Uncle. We're here to see if it's the body they asked us to look for these past few days. It drifted at night, so we didn't see it. We just heard people say it was tangled in a net, so we came to check." Just then, the other man finished untangling. He released the body. It slowly sank into the water, only the vague colors of its shirt and pants visible. The ferryman hastily said, "Brother, please, can you just pull it to the bow for us?" "Black pants, white shirt, that's definitely her." The net fisherman looked annoyed. "You guys hold the money, what do I get for doing it? Give me a little and I'll guide it out for you. If I hadn't pulled this body here, it would have sunk long ago." After a while of back and forth, they didn't reach an agreement. The net fisherman hinted he wanted some money and didn't want the two ferrymen to take the body. The two ferrymen seemed to speak boldly, threatening and invoking a bunch of moral principles, implying they were only doing a good deed and wouldn't take payment from the family of the deceased. Then, Uncle Rick stepped in to mediate, telling the two ferrymen to give the net fisherman some money and then take the body. The two ferrymen listened to Uncle Rick and pulled out 100,000 dong, giving it to him. 100,000 dong was a lot back then, almost equivalent to 2 days' wages for the fishing couple. After taking the money, the fisherman jumped back into the water, bent down, grabbed the body's leg, and pulled it towards the ferry boat. One ferryman lowered a plank towards the water's edge, while the other spread a torn plastic sheet on the boat's floor and tossed an old mat beside it. The fisherman pulled the body to the bow, then turned it sideways, bent down, and tried to lift it with both hands to push it onto the plank, but he couldn't. The body just barely surfaced, and then his strength gave out and he let go. Seeing he couldn't do it, he called for help. "You two up there, help me pull it up. It's as heavy as a water buffalo." The two ferrymen seemed hesitant, afraid of getting dirty. One went inside, got a rope, and threw it into the water. "Just tie it around its belly for me so I can pull it up. It's too dirty otherwise." The fisherman took one end of the rope and tied it securely around the body's belly. Then, he tossed the other end to the two ferrymen. The two bent over, lips pressed together, pulling the body up. The rope slowly slid into its armpit and settled there. The drowned girl's shirt also came undone with the rope, pulled up to her neck, covering half her face, revealing a pale, swollen belly. As it got closer, Her pants also caught on the metal plank and were pulled back, making her look like her pants had fallen off. The upper part was already gruesome. I dared not look at the lower part and kept turning my face away. Looking at it, I somehow kept imagining Leon's body last night when she was almost drowning. It was utterly horrifying. And one strange thing was that this girl wasn't wearing any underwear. I wondered if she had been assaulted, and the perpetrator had hastily put her outer clothes back on, then plunged the knife into her chest. The body was pulled up, leaving behind bits of flesh, greasy hair, and a mixture of blood and gore on the plank. It was a repulsive sight. It was dragged onto the middle of the plastic sheet, then covered with the torn mat, with two mangled legs, a mix of bone and flesh, protruding. Noticing the pants had slipped down, something bulked up in the pocket area, and a little red peeked out. The ferryman picked it up and pulled out a red fabric wallet. Opening it, he found an ID card, a photo, some loose change, and a crumpled, tattered piece of paper. I was curious, so I jumped over to look when he opened the ID card. Despite being soaked in water for a long time, the old lamination technology held up well. It was still legible. The photo looked relatively recent, showing only long, shoulder-length hair and a round face. Let's see the name and hometown, I thought. Nguyen Thai Huong Thao, June 15, 1982, Ward X, District Y, City Z. Oh, she's from the city? Then her family must be quite well off. This corpse, it seemed, now held value for bargaining with the family. After seeing it, the ferryman looked visibly brighter. He turned to his younger brother and nodded. That's it. Take it back to the ferry terminal. Her family must be arriving soon to claim her. As soon as he finished speaking, he went to the back, started the engine, and was about to turn the boat around when he saw several figures in blue shirts waving from the shore. Come back here, come back here. Wearing those shirts, they must be district police, not local officers. They were surprisingly quick. Usually, they never cared. This must be a murder case, and the family probably paid them off a little to investigate. The two ferrymen reluctantly complied, turning their boat towards the police officers on the shore. The officers questioned them for a bit, then told the two ferrymen to carry the body ashore. The ferrymen refused, saying they would only hand over the body when the family arrived. If not, they would drive it back to the middle of the river and return it to its original spot. People here are usually quite stubborn. The police officers had no choice but to sit and wait for the family to arrive before proceeding. The fishing couple, on the other hand, quickly tossed the knife back onto their boat and went back to fishing. And so, the corpse, which had previously been considered a gruesome, despised thing, suddenly became a valuable commodity to be haggled over. I'm sure that after settling things with the two ferrymen, this family would still have to pay a hefty sum to the police before they could take the body home, and then there would be a pile of additional costs. My uncle and I lingered for a moment, then the two of us started the engine and headed back to our main station. Around dusk, Uncle Ben said we wouldn't be cooking dinner tonight. We'd go ashore to Uncle Peter's house for dog meat. Apparently, Uncle Peter had caught a dog on the sandbar today and brought it home to butcher. I finished showering and then ambled around, waiting for evening to go drinking. Tonight, those working girls were cruising early, surprisingly. Last time it was too dark to see them clearly, but tonight I could get a closer look. The first girl looked very appealing from behind, but completely disappointing from the front. The second girl was a bit awkward, wearing a dress and splaying her legs to paddle. And the third girl was standing at the stern of a boat, doing her business with some boatmen. Evenings here were bustling, like a floating market. Around 6 p.m., my uncle told me to go to Uncle Peter's house. He wanted me to help Uncle Peter with whatever he was doing, as it would take him too long alone. Uncle Peter's house was also right by the river. Walking there would be too far. My uncle and I quickly took the boat. Passing by where the corpse had been in the afternoon, I saw the ferry boat was still there, and a fairly large crowd was on the bank, with lanterns brightly illuminating a corner of the river. It was too dark to see clearly, but it seemed the corpse was still under the ferry boat. At Uncle Peter's house, Uncle Rick and my two cousins were already there. The three of them had just finished plucking the dog and were now covering it with straw to singe it. The dog looked quite large. With this many people, even eating and throwing some away, there probably wouldn't be enough. After singeing, my cousin and I were assigned to prepare the innards. I hated this job the most because dog guts were incredibly messy. The two of us carried the entire set of organs to the riverbank and sat down to work. This dog must have been greedy. Its guts were so big and round, heavy in my hands. While preparing the guts, I smelled a strange odor but tried to ignore it and continued. My cousin, meticulously separating the stomach, snorted and turned to me. "What did this dog eat? Its stomach is disgusting, full of meat and blood." I turned to look. My cousin reached in, pulled out a bit, and washed it in the water. He felt something gritty. He dipped it in the water and swirled it around to see what it was, and it looked like a crushed human fingernail. He probably thought the same as me and brought the stomach closer to his nose to smell. The moment he smelled it, he immediately threw the stomach down and shot up. "Damn it, Old Man Tam's dog ate the drowned corpse there. Throw it away." I also flinched, stood up, threw the guts down, and backed away. It turned out this was Old Man Tam's dog. If I had known, I wouldn't have come here. This was indeed the dog that had gnawed off the arm and dragged it away the previous night. I had to go tell the others to stop. I went to ask Uncle Peter if it was indeed Old Man Tam's dog, and he nodded. When I mentioned preparing the guts earlier and seeing it gnaw the arm the other day, Uncle Peter continued butchering, his face stern. "Oh, river fish eat that stuff, and we eat fish, so what's the problem? Just throw out the guts and we'll eat the meat. What's wrong with that?" I turned to my two uncles, seeking agreement, but they seemed to side with Uncle Peter. And it seemed my cousin wasn't as scared as I was. He was still bustling about, helping the others continue. Knowing I couldn't stop these liquor-loving men, I gave up, deciding not to eat anything later. With nothing else to do, I found solace in my water pipe. Around 8 p.m., everything was ready and the drinking began. I didn't dare eat the dog meat, though it looked tempting, so I just filled my stomach with vermicelli and vegetables. After eating a bit, I moved to a chair to watch TV and smoke my water pipe, nodding off, waiting for my uncles to finish so we could go home. These men were champions of lingering. It was past midnight, and they were still chatting away. My eyes were completely strained. Uncle Rick told me to take the small boat back first to look after the belongings, and the others would borrow Uncle Peter's car to go home later. Tonight, the sky was pitch black, and there was a thick fog. Going alone on the river felt a bit eerie. The water was flowing upstream. I considered staying close to the bank to make it easier, but then remembered the floating corpse from earlier and didn't dare. So I stayed in the middle of the river, hugging the edge of the sandbar. As I approached the section where Leon had fallen the other day, the engine suddenly lost power and stalled. I tried to start it again, but it wouldn't catch. Checking carefully with my flashlight, I realized it was out of fuel. Damn it, how unlucky. The boat was drifting in the middle of the current, with not a single other boat in sight and nothing to paddle with. I stood for a moment, looking closely to see if any fishermen were netting, but the fog obscured everything. What now? I couldn't just let the boat drift forever. After a while, I decided to strip off my clothes, jump into the river, and pull the boat to the sandbar. The water was icy cold, as if it wanted to cut through my flesh. This section was quite deep. I couldn't touch the bottom, so I used my legs to push the boat towards the sandbar. I wasn't particularly tired, but a sense of dread began to creep in. My mind kept replaying the scene of Leon falling here, and this was also the spot where Old Man Tam had caused a girl's death long ago. A shiver ran down my spine, and goosebumps rose. My heart began to pound wildly. My mind conjured a host of horrors. I felt as if someone was close by, watching me. Occasionally, I'd turn my head to look around, trying to reassure myself. I saw nothing but patches of thick fog, forming strange shapes, dancing on the water to tease the waves. However, it wasn't good that I suddenly thought of the riverbed beneath my feet, the place where Leon had almost dragged me to my death the other day, the place where someone had died long ago. What if a water ghost suddenly pulled my leg down? My mind raced, my legs kicked harder, and my hands gripped the boat's side tightly. After a while, my feet finally reached the sandbar. Seeing the vague outline of the bank somewhat reassured me. After pulling it for several tens of meters, I finally reached the shore. Feeling a bit safer, I jumped into the boat, put my clothes back on, and lit a cigarette to warm myself and calm down. Then, I took the rope, slung it across my chest, threw the bow of the boat, and stood on the bank, pulling. It was only a short distance left to our destination, but it didn't seem easy at all. This was the bank where the floating corpse had been pulled ashore earlier that afternoon. They must have brought it ashore and performed an autopsy right there. With about 20 meters left, I started to smell the sweet scent of burning incense and votive paper. I saw several incense sticks stuck near the water's edge, and on the bank, they glowed red then flickered out with each gust of wind, like demonic eyes lurking, watching for something. A little further away, people had also placed incense, I presumed. That was where Old Man Tam used to pull bodies ashore for burial when he was alive. I had stood right next to the corpse earlier that afternoon without feeling anything, so why was I so scared now? When I arrived, votive paper flew everywhere on the bank and floated yellow on the water's surface. Looking down, half-burnt incense and candles were scattered all over, and 2 long pieces of white cloth were discarded right at the water's edge. The shirt, similar to that of the drowned girl, was also lingering there. I was a bit shaky, but I had to keep going because this spot was close to where the fleet of boats was docked. If anything happened, I could just scream. As I pulled the boat past, for some reason, both the shirt and the white cloth got caught in the boat's propeller. They just swirled around like a tail. It was annoying and made me uneasy, but I didn't dare jump down to remove them. I pulled as fast as I could, and finally reached my destination. When I reached Old Man Tam's bamboo thicket, I felt a shiver again. This section required me to hug the water's edge, passing through the thicket to pull the boat through. Moving very slowly and hesitantly, I suddenly heard the prolonged, drawn-out howls of dogs from the houses on the bank. I involuntarily thought of Old Man Tam's dog, which had just been beaten to death, and of the vaguely floating corpse stuck right at the base of the thicket, stranded on the bank, looking forward. I didn't know what to do, but this spot was close enough. I waded into the water, climbed onto the boat, threw the anchor ashore, and then ran as fast as I could. I'd retrieve it tomorrow morning. I circled around the bamboo thicket, cut through the cornfield, running like crazy. Finally, I escaped. I climbed over a pile of boats. By this time, everyone was asleep, except for a few gambling boats that still had their lights on. As I nearing my destination, I heard a sound in the distance. Looking closely, I saw the small boat, like those used by the working girls, drifting far away. It looked exactly like it was drifting freely, not being paddled by anyone. Were they really going all the way to the middle of the river for their business today? Usually, they tied their boats to the stern of a large boat, and after work, they would just sleep there until the next morning. Sometimes, they had customers all night long. I was a bit suspicious that the boat had broken loose and was drifting like the other day, but surely not. I thought about calling out, but decided against it. It was the middle of the night, and waking people up would spoil things. I quietly stepped into my boat, washed my hands and feet, and crawled inside to sleep, seeking warmth. The next morning, around 7 a.m., my 2 uncles leisurely came onto the boat. I went out to buy some food for breakfast. There were many vendor boats here, but they were a bit expensive, and they also used inaccurate scales, so the prices were practically double what they were ashore. Uncle Ben was cautious, always keeping a hanging scale on the boat, so whenever we bought anything, he'd reweigh it. The vendors hated us but couldn't do anything about it. Some boats preferred to walk to the village market to buy food, which was cheaper, tastier, and saved a lot of money. After eating, I was at the bow of the boat, leaning over to wash dishes in the river, when I heard some women returning from the market talking about a drowning incident at the other end of the river. I overheard that it was a working girl who had her boat capsized in the middle of the river and died last night. This morning, some of her colleagues paddled by and saw the overturned boat drifting near the shore, with her sandals and a pillow floating around. There was a large crowd gathered there, waiting for her family to arrive to search for the body. I thought about what I had seen last night and wondered if it was the same boat. I prayed it wasn't, but I had a strong suspicion. I was afraid that if it were true, everyone would blame me, so I didn't dare say anything to anyone. After cleaning up, I also went there to listen in. By this time, the family had arrived. This girl was from the province across the river, not from this area. Her boat had overturned and drifted ashore right where people had recovered the drowned body yesterday afternoon. A little further from that spot was where Leon had fallen that night, and also where a girl had drowned long ago due to Old Man Tam and his wife capsizing their boat. Today, observing carefully and listening to the boatman's analysis, it was likely that the current had overwhelmed her and capsized her boat in the middle of the river. That spot had a converging whirlpool that swirled into a funnel shape. Every time a boat passed there, the water would toss it around. But for a tiny boat like the drowned girl's, it would be difficult for the water to capsize it so easily. Seeing her mother writhing on the bank, weeping, was truly heartbreaking. Some more sensible people were hiring others to search for the body. Who did they hire? It turned out 4 fishing boats were arriving, all manned by people from my extended family, including Uncle Peter and his wife. The 4 boats split into 2, using grappling hooks to repeatedly drag the riverbed. They searched around the bank, down to the bottom, then suspended their hooks in the middle of the river within a nearly 1 km radius, but nothing got caught. Everyone was helpless and stopped, concluding that the body had drifted far away. The family, at a loss, finally listened to the villagers and immediately sought help from Master X, the region's top spiritual master. The master looked to be over 80. He wore white clothes, his hair was long and white, styled in a bun like an onion bulb, and his beard was also long and white. His weathered, healthy skin and round face, coupled with long, sharply curled eyelashes, gave him a distinguished appearance, much like an elder from ancient Chinese wuxia films. He released 2 white silk ribbons into the river and performed a ritual above, like a summoning of the soul. I don't know what kind of magic he used, but after the ceremony, everyone looked at the white silk ribbons and saw several distinct bird-foot-like imprints appear on the silk. Then he pointed towards the middle of the river and said, "This girl was drowned right in the middle of the river. There's an ancient drowning spirit here. This girl's age matches, so it pulled her down to take her place." The spirit in the river died an unjust death on the very day of the dead tide, making it incredibly malevolent. Go to that exact spot again, and you'll find the body sitting at the bottom of the river. The family followed his instructions, dragging their hooks through that section again, but found absolutely nothing. Master X told them to stop, then lit a handful of incense sticks, prayed, and brought a drum to the river's edge, beating it. After he had beaten it for a while, slowly, right in the middle of the river, at the very spot where the water current was strongest, the body gradually surfaced, back first, then its buttocks. After that, it was swirled and tossed by the whirlpool. Everyone pulled it onto a boat and brought it to shore, placing it close to the water's edge. Even though the body had been pulled up and placed on the bank, it was rigid, its legs bent as if sitting, its arms cramped as if crossed, and its eyes were wide open, showing only the whites. Its clothes and flesh were covered in red river silt. When her mother hugged and shook her, just like other river drowning victims, fresh blood slowly oozed from her mouth. Her family members concentrated on massaging her arms and legs to relieve the stiffness, and at the same time, stripped off all her clothes, scrubbing her clean of mud and dirt right there. Afterward, she was wrapped in a thin blanket and placed on a hammock. 2 people carried her into the village for a car to take her back to her hometown for burial. Sitting and listening to Master X talk with the people around was quite interesting. He said that those who die unjustly, especially by drowning, their souls will linger in this area, unable to reincarnate and find peace. To find salvation and escape the fate of a water ghost, they are compelled to drag someone else down to take their place. That's why one person keeps pulling another down to substitute for themselves. Then everything returned to normal. I, for my part, felt a bit guilty, thinking that if I had called out to her that night, things might have turned out differently. But I also told myself it was fate and it couldn't be avoided. From that night on, I never dared to jump into the river to bathe in the evening again. Many times, waking up in the middle of the night to use the restroom, looking towards that direction still sent shivers down my spine. Over a year later, a series of misfortunes befell Old Man Tam's family. First, his eldest son, while diving for an old boat at the bottom of the river, lost his float and was searching too close to the boat channel. A passing boat's propeller struck him, and he died. His second son, for reasons unknown, suddenly went mad. In the middle of the night, he locked the doors, grabbed an axe, and murdered his wife and 2 children in the house, then slit his own throat and drank pesticide to commit suicide. Only his youngest daughter, who hid under the bed, escaped harm. That incident caused a stir for a whole year. And Old Man Tam's youngest daughter had an argument with her husband and took her 8-year-old child to the river to commit suicide. The child escaped from her mother's embrace and managed to crawl to shore, but she drowned. Relatives who consulted a fortune teller said it was the spirit of the girl who drowned long ago, possessing her and demanding retribution. Because Old Man Tam and his wife had caused her death in the past, people set up an altar at that spot, praying and seeking justice for the spirit. After that, they invited her spirit to be worshipped in the house, and gradually things returned to peace. The sandbar also disappeared a year later as the river changed its course. I continued to drift with another uncle, living a life on the river.